Live from Singapore, this is Insight with Haslinda Amin. Bloomberg Screentime is underway in LA. Let's listen in to the conversation with late-night TV host Jimmy Kimmel.
Helpful.
Okay, I have a dumb question about this. As someone who was kind of reporting on it in real time, trying to figure out what's happening, so the show goes off the air. You have all these conversations, and when you all made a decision to put the show back on the air, as my understanding at the time was, it still wasn't exactly clear what you were going to say. They still hadn't resolved the issues with the affiliates. So what do you resolve in those conversations to know you're going back if you haven't figured out a lot of the things that come out of it?
I think just the spirit of what I'm going to say rather than specifically what I was going to say. And I think that's something that we all agreed on. And I think that ultimately I wanted to kind of cover every base if I could. And sometimes he can do that, and sometimes he can't do that. And it was something really that had to come from inside me. It had to be truthful, and I had to lay it all out there and just be honest about what I was feeling and what I'd experienced. And I think I did, and I think that it probably went about as well as it could go. I knew that it wasn't going to be perfect, and there were always going to be people that didn't like it and didn't accept it. But the important thing to me was that I was able to explain what I was saying, what I was trying to say.
Because you felt like your initial comments had been mischaracterized.
I didn't feel like it was.
They were.
It was intentionally and I think maliciously mischaracterized, yes.
Yeah. Do you feel like you have become more political in your commentary on the show over the course of hosting it?
What do you think?
I think yes. I think if you talk to me when my first interaction with Jimmy Kimmel was the Man Show. Which is you and Carolla, who at this point, as best I can tell, are on complete opposite ends of the political spectrum, but still friends.
Yeah, very good friends, yeah.
And it feels like you became far more comfortable and insistent on talking not just about politics but about personal things. Maybe because you got older, maybe because you got more comfortable in the role, maybe because the world around us changed, all of those things. But
yeah, all of those things for sure. I think maturity is part of it. I think you figure out who you are. I think that when I started the show, I was mostly, my homepage was ESPN.com. It's kind of all I really cared about was sports.
Because you've been a radio sports guy.
I've been a sports guy. I did football picks on Fox NFL Sunday for years. In radio, I was on K-Rock with Kevin and Bean. I was mostly interested in sports, and I was interested in politics. I've always been even as a kid, my parents are very liberal. I've been a Democrat since I was a little boy. I think the first political cartoon I ever drew was of Jimmy Carter and John Anderson. It was I was 12 or something, and I've always been interested in politics, but I was never a particularly political person. I also think maybe you did, but maybe you didn't have to be back then. I think this is a very different situation that we're in now. And also my job, as I see it, is to talk about the news of the day, and these are the big stories of the day pretty much every day.
And how much of that, can you see a difference, because we're in Trump 2, do you feel like it was the need to talk about politics is greater when he has been president as opposed to when other people, because you started when Bush was president, then you had Obama, Trump, Biden, Trump. It does feel like things have gotten more political over time, but do you think it is also sort of I don't want to use the word quirk, but a facet of Trump and his relationship with the media?
Yeah, he's on TV all day, every day, so he gives us a lot to use, to deal with. That's unusual. That's not how it used to be. You'd occasionally get a video of George Bush, walking the wrong way on stage, and then you'd make a week out of it, or somebody trips or something like that. But now it's just, you hear him, you see him, he's just presented himself so frequently at it's just more digestible, and it's more digestible and less digestible at the same time.
Right. Do you feel like you interact with a lot of comedians? Do you think there's some writers and comedians I've spoken with who feel like comedy's actually been harder with him as president? Mm-hmm. What you just said is, in a way, there's more material to work with. What would you say his impact on comedy has been?
Well, is there more? I don't know if there's more material. It's just more focused in one area. I'm not a stand-up comic. I know for stand-up comics, they work out their material and they do mostly that material every night. So politics change so quickly, it doesn't necessarily lend itself to that job. For me, I've always been more interested in doing new jokes when I started on the radio every day and doing new jokes every night. I don't love the idea of repeating myself. It feels more like acting to me than broadcasting, and I think essentially I'm a broadcaster and I'm more interested in that. So I can't speak to whether it's made their job more difficult. I know a lot of them just try to stay away from it, and I get it. I get it. You're walking into a town and you don't know who's in the room, and you just want to make people laugh, and you're not necessarily on a crusade, and I get it, and I don't think any of those guys should be required to speak the way I do, or the way Stephen Colbert does, or Jon Stewart does, and I think that applies to people on television too. You don't have to do this. It's just I choose to do it. Since you came back, have you asked Trump or Carr to come on? No, I haven't. I wouldn't necessarily be interested in Brendan Carr on the show, but yeah, I'd love to have Trump on the show for sure. Yeah. I mean, I feel like he knows that he wants. I don't know. All right, I'll ask him. I'm curious about you had Aziz Ansari on this week, and you pressed him a lot on this Riyadh Comedy Festival that a bunch of comedians went and did. Do you, as someone who interviews for a living, did you give him a heads up you were going to ask him about that? Yes. I mean, you know how talk shows are. We basically there's an understanding of what you're going to talk about. Sometimes it veers off into various directions, but they always know basically what the topics are going to be. Yeah. And why? I guess, did you feel it was important to ask him about that because you had a point of view on comedians going to that festival? It seemed like you were against it. I wouldn't have gone, but I wanted to hear his reasons. And I thought he had some compelling reasons, and nothing's black and white. It's not something I would do, but I do understand the idea that if we close ourselves off to the world, or we isolate somebody, that maybe it's not good. I don't know that my reasoning is the correct reasoning. I also... we see it happening in this country too. I mean, we travel abroad. Many of us don't want to be held accountable for what our president does and says. As an American, going someplace, I'm fortunate enough to be well known and people know where I'm coming from. But I think it would be a different situation if people didn't know who I was. And I think I'd probably be the first thing I'd say as I got into every cab is, I didn't vote for him, just FYI, So I do think that there's, it makes me understand that position better. Have you done a paid gig for a despot? Is that? Let me think. Bill Gates once, yeah. Mm-hmm. That's 2 Bill Gates references in one day. Okay. And I would kill him in tennis. No, I would not kill him in tennis. He would kill me in tennis. But do you have, because you've interviewed so many people, is there like a dream guest you've never had that you still really want to have? Yes, I would love to have Banksy on the show. Yeah, okay. That's my dream guest. Okay, some people have Daft Punk, you have Banksy. Yeah. You brought up Colbert earlier. You've spoken out a little bit, I think largely about the coverage. You feel like CBS or someone is putting numbers out there about how much money he's losing, and you think that's
can't be possible. Why is that?
It's because it just doesn't make any. I know what the budgets for these shows are. I know what I make. I know what Steven makes. I know what the ad sales people make. I know that there are values that nobody bothers to consider, like the affiliate fees that have to account for a portion of that when you talk about an hour of television every night, 5 nights a week. So I know that it's not $40 million. Is the show losing money? That I don't know. I can't imagine that it's losing a lot of money if it is.
So what is the ballpark, the budget for these shows these days?
$120 million.
And they make about that much, a little more, a little less?
Yeah, I mean, you never really know,
Because how much do you attribute the affiliate fee to your show versus every other?
Well, I don't know what the specific affiliate fees. Each market has a different, amount that they pay. But I also know this. I know that if we're losing so much money, none of us would be on. That's kind of all you need to know. I mean,
he's not on.
This is not PBS, he is not on. But if they lost $40 million last year,
they would have canceled it already.
Yeah, they would have sent everyone home.
Okay, so you set me up for that one. Your contract is up next May, I believe.
Yeah.
You going to stick around past that?
Well, it's funny. I often answer that question, and then I do the opposite of what I said.
You previously said this is going to be like my last one.
The last 3 contracts, I said this is the last one. So I've learned not to say anything anymore because it upsets my staff, and it's best that I just, when I make a decision, I will make that decision.
Okay, since we're not going to get into the decision, have you made a decision and you're just not ready to talk about it, or you haven't made a decision?
Well, that would kind of say that I'd made a decision, right? So I think I'd just rather not talk about it.
Let's imagine a world.
I'll tell you when I decide, okay? All right.
I appreciate it. Let's imagine a world after the show, because there will be a moment after the show. We're not talking about when. You don't know. You don't think.
I can't imagine that the world is going to go on without me, but go ahead.
Have you given any thought to what you'd want to do after it? You're friends with Ted Sarandos, you could go on Netflix. You're friends with Bill Simmons, you could do a podcast. Not sure you'd want to.
You mean besides playing Boggle on Netflix?
Besides playing Boggle on Netflix.
Yeah, I've given it thought. Because I thought I really was going to leave like 9 years ago or whenever I said I was going to leave, I started a production company, and I'm interested in a lot of things. I have a lot of ideas. Most of them are not good ideas, but some of them I think are really good ideas, and they're not just television related. I have a lot of different projects that I'm interested in. I'm just like,
what's one you're really into right now?
Well, I'm working on a show with Mark Rober on Netflix, and I'm working...
Big YouTuber, for those who don't.
Yeah, Mark Rober's a YouTuber. Your kids know who he is if you don't know who he is. I've got a sitcom with a guy named Chris DiStefano, who's a very funny comic. I've got some other projects that are not television related that I can't necessarily talk about yet, but I think are going to be really a lot of fun and hopefully successful.
You mentioned talking about it being the end. I was curious, I didn't ask you earlier, was there ever a moment in that kind of the week or two of chaos where you thought your show was never going to go back on?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, right. I did, and I'll tell you why. Because I'm a troublemaker just by nature, and my first year, the Lakers beat the Pistons in the NBA playoffs, and I said something to the effect of, well, I hope they don't burn Detroit down, and everyone in Detroit was very unhappy.
This was the 2004 finals that the Lakers ended up losing, but they won a game maybe in Detroit?
Yeah, it was a game.
Sorry.
You're right. No, you're right. I know. I said that, and people were mad, and they pulled me off the air in Detroit. And a guy who's really been like my mentor at ABC, Alex Wallow, said to me, he said, if we don't have Detroit, you're done. The show's over. And I said, really? And he said, yeah, you can't go forward without a major market like that, which was news to me. So I went to Detroit and did the show for a week there and kissed as much ass as I possibly could. But the idea that I would not have whatever it was, 40 affiliates, I mean, knowing that Detroit was a deal breaker, I was like, well, that's it, because there seemed to be a list of demands presented to me and I was not going to go along with any of them. And I was like, well, I guess we're done. I said to my wife, that's it. It's over.
Did you see that thing about the number of people who canceled Disney Plus? Because
I did, yeah.
Do you think that's real?
I hope so. I don't know. I mean, it gave me a feeling of power that I've never had before.
You brought up YouTube, which I think a lot of people would say has been sort of one of the primary sources of the downfall of late night over the last little bit. Mm-hmm. How have you changed your show to kind of appeal to people on YouTube, and why do you think you can't make more money there?
I never have changed my show to make it for YouTube. I'm very conscious of the fact that ABC pays for the show and YouTube pays nothing, and YouTube gets to sell it and keep half the money, and that's quite a deal for them. It really is. But I've never made the show for YouTube. With that said, I love YouTube and I love being on YouTube, because all you really want deep down is for as many people to see your stuff as you can. And I know that it has hurt, because it is so easy to watch the monologue on YouTube now. I know that it has hurt the ratings, not just for our show, but all of the shows. And maybe that's kind of what has killed late night TV. More likely the fact that we have our lead-ins are a tenth of what they were when I started. That's probably more likely the reason. But I love the idea that people in other countries are watching YouTube. I love the idea that
do you look at the views for your?
I do. Yeah.
I looked recently, and I was alarmed to see that the most watched video from your show had fewer views than the average Mr. Beast video. And I don't know what that says about the state of the world, but
I think it says Mr. Beast is kicking ass, is what it says, yeah. Well, you know what? There is a big difference. When you do the show every night, you're not going to get as many views. But we still, I mean, I woke up this morning, there were 2.2 million views of my monologue the night before. So for everyone who says late night is dying, it's just not true. We still have, probably at 3.5 million right now. We'll still have 5-6 million people watching the show every night. That's a lot of people. I mean, that's more than most of the primetime shows.
Right.
And you don't hear that about primetime.
Ratings get kind of covered in a weird way. Like you talked about 2.2 million views on YouTube, right? And the metric for a view on YouTube is totally different from the metric for a view on TV, right? You watch it for 30 seconds a minute.
TikTok is 3 seconds, I think. YouTube is 30. You have to watch it for at least 30 seconds.
Yeah, we have YouTube comms right here if you want to.
And TV, I think, is like a 5-minute chunk that you have to.
It's usually
in a quarter hour.
The average number of people watching it over the full course is what the rating that gets reported.
Right.
We had Greg up here. Why do you think the topical comedy thing has never really worked on Netflix?
I don't know. I think maybe people are expecting something different. People are very regimented.
Yeah.
When we started our show, we wanted to do everything different. It was like, we're going to do this, and this is going to be different. That's going to be different. And then over the years, we realized, they just want to see a desk and the guests and a band, and don't fuck around with it. It's a great format. It's Steve Allen invented it 50-something years ago, and it's exactly as it was then for a reason.
Yeah. Do you feel like, I know you're not part of the decision-making process on this at all, but do you feel like there will be, the Tonight Show would be the last show to get canceled, I would assume?
Yes, I think so.
Do you think that show will last a really long time, or do you feel like eventually all these shows go away and have to get reinvented and whatever?
I don't think there's a reason for these shows to go away. I think there are ways, these shows started out because they were a way to get high-priced talent for almost free. That was the whole trick. That was the whole reason they started these shows. It was deemed to be promotional. Sure. So the idea that these shows need to cost $120 million,
it's crazy.
They don't need to cost $120 million. And somebody will figure it out and just...
It's like what a Hot Ones is, makes the similar concept for considerably less money.
Right, yeah. I mean, I think you could still have the same format. You could still have a band. You could have all of those things and still do the show for a lot less money. It's just the people aren't going to make it. The host is not going to make as much money. And the audience isn't going to be as big. But that's okay because, I mean, I love seeing these. You know, I love the idea that people can make a living with 200,000 viewers every day or every night. And they can talk about weirdly specific things. And those people who are really interested in those weirdly specific things have a place to take those, to absorb that stuff. I think that's great. I love the idea that a 16-year-old can have their own TV show.
What is the weirdest channel you follow on YouTube or TikTok?
I'm not on TikTok. I do not put that on my phone. I follow, let's see, on YouTube. Well, weirdly, my 8-year-old son, he adds subscriptions to our list, and there suddenly were like 11 Jesus channels on my thing. I was like, is this kid a priest or maybe the Messiah? I don't know what it is. But, yeah, that's the weirdest one on our list.
Okay. I have one last question for you. Who's going to be the next CEO of Disney?
Oh, I'm never mentioned in this, right? And nobody ever, I mean, like there never is any serious discussion.
No.
Well, I will just say,
I wasn't actually going to.
It would be very foolish for me to answer that question. But I happen to love Dana Walden very much, and I think she's done a great job. And I think what has happened over the last like 3 weeks, I think was very unfair to my bosses at Disney. I don't think anyone should ever be put in a position like this. It is insane. And I hope that we drew a really, really bold red line as Americans about what we will and will not accept. I mean, I really hope that that's what comes out of all of this.
That was not actually my last question because I did not think you were going to answer it, but I appreciate it. I guess related to that, if you could give, you talk about how comedy's changed. If you could give one piece of advice to an up-and-coming comedian or an up-and-coming broadcaster, when you see those people and you see the changes in media around you, what do you, other than like follow your passion, what do you tell them to do?
I would tell them what I didn't get to do when I was a kid, and sometimes I fantasize about just starting all over again, because what I had to do when I started in radio was hang around the radio station for like 3 years, and then they let me on a little bit, and then they let me on a little more, and then when they thought I was funny, they let me on more. But it took so long for me to get on the air and to learn to do the job that now I would say start doing a podcast or start a YouTube channel. Do it every single day. It doesn't matter if anybody's watching it. Just keep doing it over and over and over and over again, and you're going to get, if you have any talent, you're going to get good at it. And if you're good, I mean, really, YouTube is very, if something is good, it will catch on. You know, if something is interesting, people will take note of it, and it may take 5 years, but you'll have something at the end of it.
This is great. Thanks for doing it.
That was advice for you.
I appreciate it. I'm going to stick around.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Should I leave now?
You leave.
Okay. All right.
But
I can just hang out.
You can do the closing remarks. You'd be better at it than I would be.
Close it up. Thank you, everybody.
That was our conversation with late-night TV host Jimmy Kimmel on Bloomberg Screentime in L.A. Now let's get straight to our top story. President Trump says Israel and Hamas have both signed off on the first phase of a peace plan. In a Truth Social post, he says all hostages will be released very soon and Israel will withdraw its troops to an agreed-upon line. Trump later telling Axios he may go to Israel in the coming days and deliver a speech at the Knesset. For more, let's go to our Horizons Middle East and Africa anchor, Jumana Basachi in Dubai. Jumana, this 20-point plan is the closest we've come to a peace deal in a very long time.
That's correct. And we've seen a major breakthrough this morning. I would say, though, Haslinda, on phase one of the deal, which would mean an immediate ceasefire and the release of hostages, there's still many questions about some of the longer-term plans. But as you know, there have been extensive rounds of discussions taking place in Sharm el-Sheikh throughout the course of this week. And one signal, perhaps, that things were going in the right direction was the arrival of some of those heavyweights from the U.S., Jared Kushner, Steve Witkoff, and Ron Dermer from Israel, the strategic strategic affairs advisor. So the arrival of those high-level representatives did signal that perhaps a breakthrough was nigh. And that is what we got in the early hours of this morning. President Trump, as ever, taking to Truth Social to announce it. That was later backed up by comments from Israel, Hamas, and Qatar. The Israeli Prime Minister saying that this is a very welcome move. This is a great day for Israel. He's saying together we will continue to achieve all of our goals and expand peace with our neighbors. That's the exact wording from the Israeli Prime Minister. Later today, there will be a vote to pass the deal, and after which the ceasefire is expected to come into effect. So that should happen around 3 p.m. local time. In terms of the actual timing of the release of hostages, not a lot of information yet, but what we do know, per an interview that President Trump gave to Fox News, is that it could happen as soon as Monday. He also floated the idea of actually traveling to the Middle East over the course of this weekend. Yesterday, the Egyptian President Sisi, extended an invitation to him, saying that he needs to be present in the region for the signing of the peace deal if it does go ahead. So we may be seeing President Trump come to the region by the end of this week.
What else are we looking out for? We know negotiation talks are actually happening in Egypt. What might transpire there?
Absolutely, Haslinda. So you raise a very important point, which is the fact that this so far appears to be a ceasefire and not necessarily the full execution of a full-fledged Gaza peace plan, which is what is included in that 20-point document. There's still questions about the extent of the IDF withdrawal from Gaza Strip. You know, currently they control around 70% of the Strip. There has been talk about them agreeing to withdraw to certain lines, the yellow lines, and then beyond that, an international stabilization force from around the world and Arab states will come into the Gaza Strip as well, after which they would then withdraw to a buffer line. So that is one question that's still unclear. The other question is perhaps an extremely sensitive one, and that is about the demilitarization of Hamas. And I say that it is very important because from the very beginning, from the outset of this war that's been going on for 2 years, Prime Minister Netanyahu has been clear that one of the war objectives is the complete demilitarization and the elimination of Hamas. There has been no mention yet as to what that demilitarization of Hamas is going to look like, and indeed how it's actually going to be enforced. So those are some of the details, in addition to some of the details surrounding the names of the Palestinian prisoners that will be released in exchange for the hostages that are released. And then finally, the perhaps bigger existential question for Gaza is who exactly is going to govern it? What is that apolitical Palestinian committee? What is that chair of peace, board of peace that is chaired by President Trump look like? And what role is the international community going to play in reconstructing Gaza, rebuilding Gaza, getting institutions back, and really making sure that this is a lasting peace as opposed to a temporary ceasefire?
Jumana, what's been the response in the Middle East and the Gulf states, because they'll play a crucial role in the security and the reconstruction of Gaza?
That also is a very pertinent point, Haslinda, because remember, we've been here once before. President Biden put forward a 3-phase ceasefire/permanent ceasefire proposal in May of 2024. And if you remember, that ceasefire actually did go into effect in January of this year, but then it was it came to an effective end by March of 2025, with Israel unilaterally relaunching attacks once again on the Gaza Strip, because in their minds at the time, Hamas had not done what was sufficient to secure the release of the remaining hostages, and also what they deemed that their demilitarization, or there was not enough talk about demilitarization. So this time you could say could be different because you do have a lot of the buy-in from those Arab states. And there's lots of reporting going around about how the attack on Doha a couple of weeks ago actually galvanized and incentivized President Trump to get this wrapped up. There have been reports of many irate or tense exchanges between the president and Israeli Prime Minister. Even today, he put out on Truth Social, Israel can't be at war with everybody. There needs to be peace in the region. So there's buy-in from Arab states. There has been pressure from President Trump on the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. But again, we're still in the early innings of this process of a long-drawn peace plan in the region.
Is there a sense that the Arab world is now more coordinated, more willing to work together because there is no proof of American security anymore?
I think that could be one interpretation from maybe a couple of weeks ago, but those conversations at the sidelines of the UN General Assembly, remember, President Trump had some meetings with the most influential GCC leaders and Arab leaders, and also Turkey as well, I should mention, playing a crucial role in the mediation efforts. And it was only after that meeting that this 20-point plan was released. So there are the handprints of many of these Arab states on that 20-point proposal. In addition, and this probably went under the radar, Qatar managed to secure amplified security guarantees from the U.S. throughout the course of the UN General Assembly. Trump actually signed an executive order pledging that an attack on Doha, on Qatar, should not happen again. And they have amplified the types of security guarantees that the U.S. is offering. So I would say that they're trying to draw a line under that incident. And of course, the reaction that we've had from the Arab states this morning has been one that is very supportive and endorsing this deal.
Jumana, great perspective there. Horizons Middle East and Africa anchor Jumana Basachi in Dubai. Let's dig deeper and get perspective from Sahar Razavi, director of the Iranian and Middle Eastern Studies Center at Sacramento State. Also with us, Rachel Brandenburg, Washington managing director at the Israel Policy Forum. Rachel previously served as director of the Iraq and Counter-ISIS Coalition Team in the Office of the Secretary of Defense. Sahar Razavi, let's start with you. I'm just wondering, how are you looking at this? Is peace finally coming to the Middle East after 3,000 years? How hopeful are you?
I think everyone is waiting with bated breath to see if this holds. As Jumana mentioned, a ceasefire is not a permanent end to the war, and there are a lot of details missing from this plan. We, of course, want to be hopeful. There has been a lot of carnage and there has been a lot of death, and we would like, of course, to see it stop. The right conditions need to be in place for a lasting peace plan, however, and everyone is a little bit nervous at this point, given the history.
And Rachel, we're close, but not close enough. Details need to be ironed out. We're short on details right now.
I think that's exactly right. And I think Sahar said it exactly right. Everyone is hopeful. There's so much elation right now among the families and the communities that have been waiting for the hostages to come home. But ultimately, this is the beginning of a process to the 20-point plan. We seem to have a deal on the ceasefire and a hostage release, but there are still a few steps to go before that happens. And as President Trump has said on social media, it looks like more likely Monday, maybe Sunday, we'll see the living hostages released. So I think I'm cautiously optimistic, but this is the beginning of what will be a very long process. I commend President Trump for putting forth the 20-point plan and rallying pretty much the whole world in support and to push this forward. But there's so much more work yet to be done.
And Rachel, you talk about so much work being done. We know that Israel and Hamas continue their talks in Egypt right now, and we know that Israel is being represented by the man closest to Prime Minister Netanyahu, and Hamas is represented by the man who can make those decisions. It's a tough situation, and both taking a tough stance. So what actually can be achieved at the talks in Egypt?
Absolutely. A lot can be achieved if there is a will. I think the parties are starting with and in the right place by agreeing to a ceasefire and hostage release. But then what happens next is a big open question. Who's going to govern Gaza? Who's going to ensure the security of Gaza? how much aid is going to be let in and how is it going to be distributed? What is the plan for the Hamas disarmament that was part of President Trump's 20-point plan? Who is comprised, who does the international board that's going to govern the reconstruction, who is on that board, who is leading Gaza, and what does the international security force look like? All of those need to be ironed out in order to achieve even a lasting ceasefire, nonetheless a sustainable day after plan that can not only begin the tremendous stabilization, reconstruction, provision of basic humanitarian aid that will be needed in Gaza, but also set up an infrastructure that Israel and Israelis are comfortable with for the sake of their own security. I think we're in a moment where the parties seem to be interested in moving forward, whether because everyone is just so tired of fighting or because President Trump is really, really pushing folks. And I think we've seen at least how hard he's been pushing Prime Minister Netanyahu over the past week or so. But they're going to have to keep their eye on the ball and keep focus on the next phases of this likely long negotiation process in order to see to fruition more than just the hostage release and ceasefire and make it a lasting end of war.
And Dr. Razani, of course, we've heard from Prime Minister Netanyahu time and time again, even more recently, saying that he does not want a Palestinian state. That is key to all the conversations. How might that play out?
I think that is not going to change anytime soon. He will publicly still, of course, hold this position for various reasons, including domestic coalition holding reasons. Nonetheless, Hamas and any other Palestinian factions are unlikely to accept the continuation of a truncated sort of mini-state at best, and most likely scenario, continued occupation of Palestinian territories. So this represents a major sticking point, and this is one of the reasons that I mentioned everyone is nervous, because Netanyahu has announced that there is a plan moving forward to formally annex the West Bank. There is public declaration that there will never be, under his watch, an autonomous or a sovereign Palestinian state. So everyone watching sort of wants to know what conditions Hamas may have agreed to then, given the conditions that Netanyahu has made very clear are his red lines. At the same time, Netanyahu has faced growing intensification of the pressure domestically from Israelis who want the war to end and the hostages to come home. And Hamas has faced unprecedented pressure from regional Arab leaders to make this end. So I think everyone involved is trying to balance these tensions, these competing interests between domestic and international pressures. There is certainly an intensification of international calls for this to end. We see massive demonstrations across European capitals. Almost 30% of the population of Amsterdam was in the streets just a couple of days ago in support of Gaza. Growing international diplomatic efforts like recognition of a Palestinian state. We see the flotillas that certainly the global Samud flotilla was intercepted and the participants were detained, and then a second one was launched. I mean, I don't think that it would be realistic to continue the way that it has continued, in spite of Netanyahu's stated commitments never to see a Palestinian state established within the territory.
And Rachel, do you see Hamas playing for time? Because if the hostages are released, it will no longer have a bargaining chip.
I think that's right. I think everyone is sort of playing for time here. I think for Prime Minister Netanyahu, he needs the time to figure out what happens to his governing coalition, how to thread the needle between the position that Sahar described, where he said never will there be a Palestinian state, and what he seems to ostensibly be agreeing to in President Trump's 20-point plan. And for Hamas too, absolutely. They have time. They don't mind sacrificing civilians, and they have the opportunity to play the long game. I am hopeful that there will be a way to demilitarize Gaza and disarm Hamas, and more importantly, create a political horizon for Palestinians and for an alternative governance structure. Use some of this time and the will. There's tremendous international political will and interest right now in helping to reform the Palestinian Authority, help to rebuild the infrastructure so that there is a Palestinian entity capable of governing Gaza and the West Bank, and just begin down the pathway of an eventual Palestinian state and an eventual two-state outcome to what has been a decades-long Israeli-Palestinian conflict, of course, and a really harrowing 2 years for everyone involved.
So, Rachel, if both sides play for time, Trump can forget about, getting a deal by the end of this week, which is what he wants. He said that time and time again.
I don't think we're going to see a deal on all 20 points of his plan by the end of this week. I think by the end of this week, hopefully we'll see come to fruition a deal on ceasefire, some amount of Israeli withdrawal. I don't know what it will be. I don't think it will be the full withdrawal. Certainly not until the hostages are back and until there's some alternative security infrastructure. And hopefully a ceasefire long enough that they're able to continue negotiating what happens next. But I don't think anyone is expecting the rest of the details to be hammered out until we see this first phase actually implemented.
And of course, Dr. Razavi, what's really key is that trust and confidence gap between the two sides, Israel and Hamas. How do you bridge that? What can bridge that?
At this point, I'm very skeptical that any trust gap could be bridged between the two parties, primary parties involved, which is why we have needed an outside mediator, multiple outside mediators. In fact, I think trust building, the ship has pretty much sailed, in my opinion, on trust building between Israel and Hamas. Having said that, that's why we put mechanisms for accountability in place, which again gets back to why everyone is nervous, because the plan, again, the 20-point plan is fairly vague. Toward the end of the plan, there is some language about supporting the establishment of a Palestinian state, but there, again, are not details about what that would look like. And this is happening in the context of extreme pressure on both sides. And it also should not go unsaid. There is extreme pressure on Trump to make this happen because he is also, like the other leaders that we're talking about, he's playing to both domestic and international audiences, and he's under a great deal of pressure domestically in the United States to get a win and to get a quick win. And he is not someone who is known for biding his time and playing things patiently and making small compromises in order to get long-term lasting objectives met. He's someone that needs sort of quick gratification and some kind of feather to put in his cap. So he wants it to be over quickly. He wants the parties to accept it, and he wants to get credit for it. This is going to be very disappointing for him as far as his objectives. If it goes the way Rachel has outlined, which I agree, it's going to take time, and that could also complicate efforts. We have seen ceasefire deals between Israel and Hamas collapse before for various reasons, and the longer it takes and the fewer specifics there are about accountability mechanisms, the more difficult it is going to be to make it a durable and lasting ceasefire.
Rachel, how is the Arab world looking at this? Because in the end, the Arab world will bear the burden of reconstruction and security of Gaza.
I think that's right. And I think we're in a unique moment where everyone has been galvanized for a number of different reasons. The sheer terror and fatigue of the past 2 years. And I think the past few weeks, past couple months of the push to recognize, the international push to recognize Palestinian statehood, which then led to Israel's push to formally annex the West Bank. And then what I think was really a catalyst for some of the recent momentum was President Trump realizing that his Abraham Accords could be threatened. And not only the ability to expand them, as he said, since the campaign trail is on his agenda and high among his priorities, but also threatening the existing accords. And whether it was the strikes in Doha, Israel strikes in Doha, or the UAE and Saudi coming out and saying, hey, this is enough with respect to annexation. If this goes forward from the UAE, current agreements are threatened. From Saudi Arabia, any future agreements will be threatened. That really seemed to galvanize the president to take a step and whether pay more attention or put more pressure, really bring everyone together for the sake of this plan that we've seen. But I completely agree with Sahar. He's not one to pay attention to the details and really stay on one topic for very long. So I think we'll need to see all international actors involved in a way different from the past, where in past iterations of diplomacy between Israeli and Arab states or between Israelis and Palestinians, the U.S. has been in the lead. And it's been the U.S. lead as the lead negotiator, the U.S. paying attention to the details, the U.S. kind of bringing the parties around. And this time I think it's going to require the Arab states, particularly some of the Gulf states, Egypt and Jordan, to continue paying attention and pushing not only themselves and the Palestinians, but more importantly, President Trump. I think some of the Gulf countries have real influence with the U.S. president right now. And if they are able to help him stay focused on this issue, but also help bring the Palestinians along, if the Europeans are able to play a role, maybe we can see some of this momentum sustained. But I think for the Arab states in particular, it is long past time for this war to be over, for, as Sahar alluded to, their own domestic reasons, in addition to sort of regional stability.
And Dr. Razani, you'd imagine that Iran and Hezbollah will be watching this really closely. How do you think they will respond? What might their reaction be?
Everyone is going to want to take some kind of credit for any kind of peace deal or lasting resolution. And everyone is going to want to play it for, again, their domestic audiences and the international arena in a way that reflects well on them. Iran and Hezbollah will most likely reference pressures that they have brought to bear on Israel in pushing them toward the negotiating table and toward making what they'd like to frame as concessions. The Israeli leadership may, of course, be expected to deny that those are concessions at all, or to the extent that they discuss them within the framework of concessions. Certainly, they'll be presented as necessities for reaching a peace deal that would bring the hostages home, which is the kind of top agenda item for domestic pressure on Netanyahu at the moment. I don't expect that Iran and Hezbollah will have anything to say that would be complimentary toward either Trump or Netanyahu for this.
Sacramento State Iranian and Middle Eastern Studies Center Director Sahar Razavi and Israel Policy Forum Washington Managing Director and Senior Fellow Rachel Brandenburg, we thank you so much for joining us today. Now we have breaking news right here. The U.S. has approved NVIDIA's chip exports to the United Arab Emirates under a bilateral AI agreement. The approval came after the UAE made plans for a reciprocal amount of investment on American soil, and that's according to a U.S. official. The licenses mark the first permits for NVIDIA AI chip sales to the UAE since President Trump took office, and a tangible sign of progress on the agreement announced nearly 5 months ago. Again, the U.S. approving several $1 billion of NVIDIA chip sales to the UAE. Still to come on the show, the outlook for oil markets with Vanda Insights, as traders assess the Gaza peace plan and U.S. inventories. Vandana Hari's with us next. Keep it here with us. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back. You're watching Insight. Just a headline to tell you about. That Gaza deal we've been discussing goes into effect at noon local time, and that's according to Israel's Channel 12. Noon local time is 5 p.m. here in Singapore. Again, the Gaza deal getting into effect at noon local time, according to Israel's Channel 12. Taking a look at where we are in terms of commodities on the back of the news out of the Middle East, we have gold futures currently trending lower, 0.6%. Brent crude as well as New York crude also down right now. Brent crude down by 0.5%. That Gaza deal going into effect at noon local time. Let's get perspective from Vandana Hari, founder at Vanda Insights, a Singapore-based provider of intelligence on the global energy markets. First off, Vandana, your reaction to that Gaza deal and the impact of oil. Is it just a knee-jerk reaction, or are we expected oil prices to continue to trend downwards?
Good morning, Haslinda. So I do think it's a knee-jerk sell-off we are seeing in crude on a perceived diminishing of a risk premium. I'm putting air quotes around it as a result of the Gaza war, because let's face it, that war hasn't been a threat to Mideast supplies for quite some time now. So, Haslinda, I would really question to what extent there was a risk premium in crude. But the backdrop of this is that there is a material, quite prominent negative bias in crude caused by widespread predictions and expectations of a huge overhang on its way through the fourth quarter and the first quarter of this year. And to a large extent, I do feel that is causing more of panicky sell-off in crude, similar to what we saw last week as well in the run-up to the OPEC Plus meeting.
So put this in perspective for us. We have several geopolitical developments around the world, including Ukraine, Venezuela, Iran. Where does Gaza stand amidst all of that? What kind of impact, what kind of meaningful impact or not will it have compared to the other developments?
Yeah, so the biggest impact of the Gaza war since it began was the threat to ships passing through the Bab el-Mandeb and the Red Sea. Now, that ceased to be a threat or a problem for the oil market because most ship owners just decided to take the longer route around the Cape of Good Hope. That is all completely embedded, priced into the market. So related to the Gaza war, of course, we have seen tensions and military conflict between Israel and Iran spiking. That too has led to bouts of risk premium in crude, but nothing on a sustained basis. So going forward, I expect this peace deal, if it lasts, again, that's something we need to keep in mind. We have seen ceasefires break down quite regularly historically. But if it does last, I do not expect crude to continue selling off as a result of the Gaza peace. But then, as I mentioned earlier, Haslinda, overall, there is a negative bias, a bearish skew in crude.
You know, the IEA has talked about, an oversupply of oil in the months ahead, including 2026. What kind of surplus are we looking at? What's your own projection on how that may impact oil prices going forward?
I think right now the market seems to be in the grip of the predictions, forecasts, including definitely the IEA, of a larger than usual, a larger than seasonally normal overhang in the market through Q4 and Q1, as you quite rightly point out. There are estimates of anywhere between 2 to 4 million barrels per day of excess supply over the next 6 months, which would be way above the seasonal norms. Now, we are entering a peak refinery turnaround season. At the same time, OPEC Plus has been putting more oil into the market. Just their targets have increased by about roughly 2.5 million barrels per day between April and November. So a surplus is to be expected. But right now, there's a great deal of debate, in fact, quite passionate debate that I see in the market and divergence over how much the surplus is going to be. My own expectations are closer to seasonal norm rather than 3, 4, and forecasting even more than 4 million barrels per day.
Goldman puts it at $56 a barrel next year. What do you say?
Yeah, so a lot of the calls for Brent slipping into $50 go hand in hand with expectations or predictions of a surplus coming, definitely highest in Q4 and Q1, but going out into 2026, generally average next year is also seen as a bigger surplus than what has been estimated for this year. But again, as you just pointed out earlier, there is still a considerable geopolitical risk to supply. We have yet to see what the Western allies come out with in terms of the Russia sanctions. Even if they be closer to the more moderate of some of the extreme steps that have been discussed, but not really gone down well with the EU. Even if that happens, I do expect that Russia risk premium to remain in crude. So more mid 60s to high 60s in the short term, and perhaps low 60s for 2026.
We gotta go. Vandana Hari, founder at Vanda Insights. Thank you so much for that. Before we go, I'll look at tomorrow's show. The president of the Thai Stock Exchange will be joining us exclusively for a discussion on the outlook for markets as trade its way the BOT's surprise hold. Keep it here with us. This is Bloomberg.